Hi YouTube, there have been developments. In an earlier post I spoke about a diagnosis that I'd received that I was likely infertile, that I was never going to be able to produce a child. 3 months later I've had a second appointment with a specialist to talk about that diagnosis and to find out what's going on. And there's further news. I'm going to start at the beginning because I think it's probably worthwhile. Context is always good, and why not throw in a little education while we can. Okay. My wife and I had been trying to have a kid for about a year. Trying is always fun, but it's getting a little frustrating. There's no baby. So we went to our family doctor to get us looked at. My wife had various tests, I had various tests, and a sample that I gave, and I will let you guess what kind of sample that was, seemed to indicate that I was producing very few and unhealthy sperm. So we thought at the time, okay, it's a health issue, it's a lifestyle kind of thing. Let's get me healthier and perhaps I'll be producing better sperm. And as well, I was referred to a specialist, a fertility specialist. So he did various hormonal tests and an ultrasound on me, and there were further tests on my wife as well. And he came back with a diagnosis that I had something called varicocele. And quick explanation of what varicocele is. It's important that your blood flow in one direction. When your heart beats, it pushes the blood through the arteries and it comes back through the veins, and you don't want at any point the blood to be going backwards through the system when the heart relaxes. You have a series of little valves, one-way valves within your circulatory system to allow the blood to flow through one way but not the other way. So what can sometimes happen, these little valves can just fail, get weak for whatever reason, and the blood will travel backwards through the system, and instead of being pushed up a vein, for instance, it will just sort of sink back into the vein, and the vein will dilate, it'll get big, and that's what will happen. And it's not usually terribly dangerous, and if you get it in your legs, you get these blue lines, and they're called varicose veins. Varicocele is the same thing in your scrotum. So what ends up happening is the blood is flowing through the arteries into your scrotum, and then it gets pumped back out again, but it sort of relaxes back into the veins within your scrotum rather than being pushed straight out, and the veins in the scrotum become dilated. And usually this, for some reason, happens on the left side, and I'm not going to try and understand the physiology behind that, but what ends up happening is you have these dilated veins in your scrotum. And as most of you probably are aware, sperm is really temperature sensitive. It's kept outside of your body for a reason. It has to be cooler than your blood temperature. In fact, normal males, if you have a fever, 3 weeks later, you'll have a dip in how many sperm you're producing. Anyway, with varicocele, with this pooling of blood, the temperature goes up, and your ability to produce healthy sperm goes downhill. If this goes on for a really, really long time, you can start to damage the tissue. Now, it's not an uncommon condition. Something like 15 to 20% of all males get this, shows up between 15 and 25. Most people will never even know. One of the symptoms is infertility. So it's quite correctable. So I was referred to a urologist who had a look at the first set of ultrasounds and also looked at a sperm sample that I'd given a second time, which had no healthy sperm. And he said, look, this has gone on for a really long time. The tissue itself has been impaired. The development of the tissue itself has been impaired. And we're not sure entirely whether surgery is going to help. And then after that appointment, I gave a third sample, which had no sperm at all. Or that was the report I got back. So my wife and I were both under the impression, and I believe this is an accurate one, that I might be at the end of my line, that I might never be able to father children of my own. It's a very difficult thing to come to terms with, to decide that you may be at the end of your genetic tree, that, I will never give my dad a grandchild. I will never have a kid with my eyes running around. That hurt enormously. And then, of course, there are things to consider. Donor sperm. Am I willing to bring up another man's child? Which is what donor sperm is about. I want to say here and now that any child in my home is welcome here and may sit on my shoulders to see further at any time he or she feels like it. And I will happily sing stupid songs for them and read them stories. But it is something to have to come to terms with, and that's what I've spent the last 3 months doing. So my wife and I had another appointment with the specialist, and we went back to the urologist, and he had done a series of genetic tests just to rule out any other possible causes of infertility, and there are numerous, it appears. Chromosomal difficulties. For instance, cystic fibrosis, I had no idea, can cause infertility. And in fact, even if you're a carrier, one of the only symptoms a male may show is infertility, but then it'll show up as a genetic marker. Turns out I don't have cystic fibrosis, so that's lovely, and I don't have any other genetic issues, so it is most likely the varicocele that's causing the problem. But lo and behold, the urologist believes that yes, surgery is a viable option, although the tissue has been impaired on one side, the other side, while impaired somewhat, might be okay. He says I'm within the 70% of people that the operation will probably make a positive difference. It's difficult to tell how much of a difference. He said the completely zero samples are not uncommon. As with normal healthy males, your supply can go up and down varyingly depending on your health. And with varicocele, that's just exacerbated. That just gets worse. So you can have some and then none. But he doesn't think things are in total failure. And although my wife and I may never naturally father a child, it is possible that just artificial insemination, which is not a terribly expensive procedure, might be available to us. And failing that, in vitro fertilization, which is much more expensive and much harder on hope, my wife, it may also be an option. But at this stage, surgery might help. I might have a kid. Oh. And now I've spent the last couple of days trying to adjust to that news. I once saw a show about a poker winner who had won a lot of money, and this was a long time ago before poker apparently got popular. And the guy had such a poker face that he'd won millions of dollars, and he was pumping his fist in the air, and his face was completely straight. And, I'm beginning to feel that way. It's just keep a poker face on everything, hope for the best, don't expect anything, and hopefully it'll work out. I'm glad, I'm thrilled. I don't know how to process this information, but I think the news is good. We'll have to see. I've got surgery probably booked. We'll see. It'll probably be about mid-July. And then 3 months after that, we'll know whether there's going to be any improvement. 6 months after that, it'll be as good as it can get, and we can assess, what options are available to us. But we have options, which is a surprise. So that's where I am today. I have options. So that's very, very nice. And if you guys have any questions about what this is like and what's going on, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Frankly, I don't think there's enough discussion about this. Male infertility is not an uncommon problem. And yet, discussing how utterly devastating, how unmanning it is to find out that you can't make your wife pregnant. I mean, there's nothing as emasculating as that. To think that, you may have to resort to other means is not a pleasant thing to contemplate, and we don't talk about it. So, if this is a springboard for discussion, fantastic. Otherwise, you can just sort of sing along with us and do a little happy dance, because I am. And that's where we are today. So, thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.